the right place. Today, my guest is 𝗚𝗍 Sharif Clark, who I met on Facebook page, and we just hit it off. I just love this woman. I just took a workshop with her this past weekend. She was teaching kitchen herb gardening, and she's going to be offering another class next month, and I'll let her tell you more about it. But 𝗚𝗍, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Amy, thank you so much for having me. I mean, grounded in Maine, this is incredible, incredible. I just love your work. So again, I'm honored that you said yes, and just couldn't wait to connect with you. This is going to be fun.
It is, yes. I love the idea. You were saying that you are full-time working with like container gardening and small space gardening, which I think is so genius. People are always thinking, you think about gardening and you think of these vast lawns that are full of vegetables and flowers and all this stuff. And we were talking about how everyone doesn't have that, and they might feel like
That's right.
they can't really garden because they don't have a yard, but you are here to say
Absolutely. And you know what,
absolutely.
as I'm, just, spreading love and joy to listeners, from here from my little town home, my little townhouse here in Raleigh, that I do everything off of my deck. And it is not a huge deck. When I think about like a 5x5, so like maybe less than 25 square feet. And that includes the chairs, that includes the rockers. And I just put out 6, 7 containers, and it's amazing what you can grow in a small space. So yeah, absolutely. I will say, when I got started, I was living in Troutville, Virginia, so not that far from Roanoke, for people who are wondering, or just kind of the southwestern part of Virginia. And I had a deck out there and I was teaching at the time, and I was using it as a way to just relax at the inner work. So I started getting seeds and just growing just on the back deck again. It didn't matter that we had 3 acres because it was all on a slope. So I wasn't growing anything on there anyway. And the deer would come out and get it anyway. So I would just I had a little deck, and right over to the side where my husband, James, would grill, I would just put out like these little planters, and that was it. And that was where I kind of cut my teeth, I guess, in learning how not to drown things, how not to get them sunburned. But I really am one of those, I always say, black thumbs turn green. You name it, I've killed it. So yeah, so if I can do it and do it in a small space, I think anybody can, and really just want to have fun with it, because food is very forgiving. So I say, give yourself a little grace, be patient with yourself, do a lot of trial and error, but yeah, you can just have a good time with it and eat in the
So cool.
process.
Heck yeah. And I just talking about it, your face just lights up. You were like,
it is so therapy, so therapy. And I can't remember what grade I was teaching at the time. I think I was a technology coach at the time. So I was doing all K-12. So I would spend a couple days at elementary in the middle, another couple days at the high school, and just to come home and just water the herbs. No one was talking to me. It was the most peaceful and calming thing. And then when things started to grow, I was like, oh my God, like I can put this in some soup, and I can put this on tacos. And I was just like, me, I've talked about food so much this past weekend. But I just love the fact that with your hands in a very small space, just in a container, and it didn't matter whether it was a little small pot, or a little planter box that you might hang on the side of a little patio. It's amazing what you can grow in a small space.
Yeah. And did you find yourself like just taking time to admire like how much, and notice how much everything is grown almost every day? You're like, oh, I think you got bigger. I
I
totally do
did.
that.
Yes. And I talk to them. And it's interesting because I'm the mom of like 2 sons. So at the time, my sons were in high school, and now they're like in their, mid to late 20s. But so, this for me was like, it was almost like having new children, without having to pay for college, Amy. It was awesome. But what was so great about it is that I found the ritual of watering in the morning before I left for work so calming. So instead of me like racing in the car or racing out the door, I would just spend in that 5 minutes in the morning to just quietly water. It became this kind of like mindfulness or like meditative practice, just 5 minutes. And then I would go and I felt like this sense of calm rush over me. It was just so awesome.
Like, I took care of my plants today. It's going to be a great day. We'll
Yeah.
see how much they grow by the end of the day.
Exactly, exactly. And oh my God, but I just remember like all of the mistakes in the beginning. I remember overwatering, especially when it was already a rainy season.
Mm,
So when you have that kind of, April and it's already raining most of the time, and then I couldn't hold back. And I think I kind of chatted with you about this at the workshop, that I was just known for using these huge, like 2, 3 gallon watering hands on these small little planters. And they were just, I mean, suffocating. I was just like, I didn't know. But I would go to a local garden center, and it was actually like a farmer's market slash garden center, but it was a family owned one. And they were the ones who first told me kind of ease up on the water, but that they're very forgiving. And so that helped me to know that even if things went completely wrong, because seeds are so inexpensive, if you're starting with seed, you're only out a couple bucks. If you really make some mistakes, you haven't spent hundreds on all these plants, and
right.
that's where it can get pricey.
Right. Oh, that's so kind of them to say that.
Mm-hmm.
And just to remind you, because it does feels like a failure if you're killing your plants. If
Yes.
I told you that I'm like known for overwatering, but I'm so scared that I'm going to forget to water. So now I'm
Right.
like once a week I'll water. But in the winter, so we have a wood stove at our house and everything in my living room is dry, me included.
Right.
So I'll give them a little extra water during the week, especially since they're all tropical.
Right, right. But I know that there's something too about like the caregiving nature of us. We want to make sure that the things in our care are going to be okay. So we tend to overdo it versus underdo it. And so it's kind of like, yeah, and that's why I kind of share it with you. I had to start like touching that soil first, touching it for dampness, and then I'm like, yeah, I think you're okay today, before I start,
We'll talk
just pouring
tomorrow.
it on again. Yeah, we'll talk tomorrow. Love it, Amy. Love it. Yes.
But I know that for myself, and I'm just going to talk about the container gardening. I think it's such a genius thing. It's a great option for people that don't have a lot of land or a lot of space. But like, I have a garden,
Yes.
I have a greenhouse. Sometimes it feels too far away
Right.
because I'm so lazy. And so I also have container gardens around my steps because
Yeah.
it's just, if I have my lettuce, first of all, like you were saying before, the critters, the deer and whatever would eat. So we don't have a lot of deer, but we have groundhogs. Um
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and we have rats. But so I have some containers for closer to me because they're not going to come as close to me.
Right.
That's how I have it in my head. And we also have chickens, and they like to peck the greens, even though they won't eat them if I give them to them. But if
Right.
they're in a pot, they are happy to peck them to death.
Yeah, it's really cool though. I love that you mentioned the groundhogs, because that was a big thing for us when we lived in Troutville, Virginia. So, of course, not so on my deck here, my townhouse in Raleigh, but when we lived there, when I wanted to put in like a box garden on the ground, that was the number one thing I had to watch out for, because we knew
Mm,
that those groundhogs would tunnel through and come up. But what's really cool about having a container is that it's just like it's fortified. I mean, they can tap on either side, but unless they climb on top of it, they're not going to get to the good stuff.
right.
So yeah, I love that. I love that.
Hmm.
I'm glad you mentioned 2 containers, because it's the number one way I find that you can just really be flexible in your spacing, and you don't need 50 containers. If you just start with 2 or 3, and you start to really get intentional about what is it that my husband and I, that my partner and I, that are my kids and I, what do we love to have? And if we just zero in on a couple of things that are like, I would say a living pantry, right? We know the things in our pantry that are our go-tos all the time. And so, if it's, spinach, or if it's, curly lettuce or leafy lettuce, or if it's making sure we have a couple of red bell peppers to go on, fajitas or something for the week. It's just little things like that, being intentional and saying, let's just grow what we love. And because it's in containers, we can move it when we need to move it. Oh no, this is wonderful. This is good. This is life happening. But I absolutely love it. Yeah, I love the whole container idea.
Oh my gosh.
That is so awesome. Tell me you have to share your dog's name. You have to share.
Her name is Whitney, and I don't know what is going on.
Hey, Whitney, no, this is good. This is life happening. This is so awesome.
Woo. Usually she makes no sound. Literally.
It's the food talk. We're having the food talk.
I guess so. She should be out walking. But oh, I lost my train of thought. Darn it. Let's see. Okay, and so how did you get started? I know, like, was there a point where you were like, I just need something, I need to grow something? Did you say that? Because I know you taught forever.
Yeah.
And you also had a podcast.
Yes. So actually the growing started back in 2011. So it really started out of just the need to just have something relaxing to do. And the actual food coming up out of the soil was like the biggest surprise to me. So for me, it was just kind of like, okay, this is going to be fun. This is going to be relaxing. And, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I actually grew something? But the idea of me being really like intentional, saying, okay, I'm going to grow all these things, I don't really think it was top of mind yet. It was as things started to grow, like those first green peppers coming in, the first little leaves of kale coming in. When I started out, and the oregano actually survived one year, and because the trial and error had finally paid off. And I thought, wait, this came out of this. And then little by little, I think I fell so in love with green peppers that I started, when I would grow one, it was my own idea of just like heirloom. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to crack this open. I'm going to pull out the seeds. And I pulled out a paper towel and I put the seeds out from that green pepper, let them dry out overnight, put them in little sandwich baggies the next day. And I was like, this is incredible. And I think I was more in awe of like the miracle of, I'm growing one green pepper, I'm ending up with like 50 seeds, and who knows how long this would last. And I actually, till this day, still have some of those seeds. And we're talking like 12 years later. Right. It has been such an amazing ride to just watch what happens when you just, you create, you look for miracles and you say, you know what, I'm just going to put it in and see what happens. I will tell you though, that couple over at the little farmer's market and store, they did tell me, I thought it was the biggest joke ever. They said, Asia, we're not really in the farm and gardening business. We're really in the gambling business. We put things in the ground and we hope something comes out. I was like, I love it.
That's me.
And they were so right, because some years I thought, didn't I put a seed in there? So I really had to start. And I have this tendency to overgrow. And I know I'm only supposed to put in one seed. Now, of course, in containers, you don't have to worry about like the packet and all that spacing they talk about in rows, because we're not like, stretching it out all over our land. But when we just put in a couple of seeds inside of a container, we see results. I have been known to like double dip, triple dip before I know it. It's overcrowding.
right?
And I said, Aisha,
If
just
two come
trust
up,
yourself.
four would be even better.
Exactly. And then I found out, Aisha, you're really just, you're shooting yourself in the foot because they're overcrowding. And you have to trust that if you put in 2 seeds, one's going to come up. You don't need to put in 10. So I really had to train myself to say, okay, let me put in 2. And that way, if one doesn't make it, the other one does. And so part of it is gamble. It's a little bit of a numbers game, but it is fun to see when both do come up because sometimes one will come up and sometimes both will come up.
Right.
But it's
I
just
tend
fun to
I tend to
watch.
overplant as well, but for that exact reason. Like because
Yeah.
I'm doing rows, and if I plant a whole bunch and they don't all come up, at least some will come up.
Yes.
That's my
Yeah.
hope. Last year I had none come up of everything, but that is last year was special. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm like I'm happy to thin. I'm happy to thin out if they're crowded, as long as
That's
something's coming
right.
up. Um, and so I'm curious, Asia, when you were thinking about starting to grow something, were there other things on your list of relaxing activities?
It actually was at the same time I was doing watercolor painting, which just so you
Ooh.
know, not very good, but the point was to just play around, have some fun. So I had that and I can't remember. I don't think I did yoga or anything. I don't have the patience to sit and just be still in that way. My mind was always running. So something, as long as I did something with my hands, it was incredibly relaxing. So
Oh.
watercolor painting at the time, definitely playing around with herbs. And then I started to pick up drawing again later on. But those were, it's still, I try to stick with things where my hands were constantly moving. It just made me feel like my mind wasn't. And it was just like I needed an off switch.
Yep. Well, you're
Um,
focused on your hand.
exactly, exactly. And cooking, I absolutely love. And that fit hand in hand with the herbs and the growing things because I remember um always, and I still do it here in the little kitchen garden, right? In the wintertime I keep everything pretty much in the windowsill, but during the spring and summer my kitchen garden is on the deck and I have like this nice wooden rectangular base, and then so I have everything in there: mint, parsley, oregano, thyme, rosemary. And so to me there's something so meditative about just stepping out barefoot, like no shoes. I just step out there, pick some things for the morning's omelet. So on the weekend, I would get a couple of pieces of thyme and oregano, bring it back in for the omelet.
Mm.
And it was just the coolest thing. So for me, it really started, the connection with the cooking was why it was so important to me, because I knew I was using it immediately. And then my family would benefit from it. On top of that, the calming herbs, something like mint, that started, my son started to get really hooked on identification. We would rub the leaves between our fingers and I would say, tell me which one this is. And they said it was always something so calming about mint. And so
Mm.
it was just little things like that where we would just kind of go through, do a little herb ID, and they would just rub it between their fingers. The oils get on your skin and it's kind of like, and each one gives you a different feeling. It's incredible.
Mm. Oh, I wish I could smell fresh mint right now.
You and me. That's right. That's
I
right.
love mint. We have because mint grows crazy if you let it.
Yes.
We have 2 patches, like large patches. They're like 10 by 10,
Mm,
10 feet by 10 feet
that is
um,
awesome.
of mint, and it grows about 4 feet tall. It's
It's
called
incredible.
it's called apple mint. We got one, I think one
Mhm.
root from my husband's mom, and it just smells like spearminty. And I
Mm,
make like fresh mint tea in the summer, and I just while it's growing, and I had it until like October. I was still like
yeah.
picking it off at just a couple, like a little stem, and just put it in hot water, and oh my goodness. And I
It's
dried a
just
whole bunch too. It's just so delicious.
yeah, it's incredible too how you get those. That's one that will take over. I mean, it's incredible. When it grows, it grows. It's funny for me, rosemary, like that's one of those things I have to keep by itself because good Lord, does it take over? It's just kind of like
Oh.
doesn't play nice with others. I mean, it just
Oh.
starts
Do you
to
have like a
rub.
tree? Like a
Yeah,
little rosemary tree?
actually, when I buy for that one, I don't do it from seed. I'll just buy like a small plant. And in a few months, it is just like wildfire. So I
That's
usually
awesome.
put it in a container solo just to allow it to kind of, so it doesn't crowd anything else out.
Hmm.
But it's just amazing, just the like medicinal purposes. I mean, there's just so many things that we can, and just in our everyday life. And I think it gives us such a appreciation of just what's right in front of us. So
Yeah.
cool.
And I
Yeah.
love that you taught your kids to appreciate that, because those moments, I'm sure that you still have them like in your mind when you're watching them
Yeah.
just smell and
Just
rub the,
smelling.
oh goodness.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Over here in our community, they had a little area where families could have little rectangular boxes, like the raised beds.
Hmm.
And so my younger son, Rashad, the one who's 26, so cool. He used to say, "Mom, can I go over and water for you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so he'd go over and kind of water that box. But he was saying it was something just so calming and just meditative about doing it, and he could identify this is that, just not by, I mean, that touching and that smelling. It's so sensory,
Hmm.
so sensory.
Yeah. And it's so, I think it's so important for the younger generation to find that appreciation. I mean, it's one thing for you to have something um calming, but I think I'm super passionate about kids growing gardens, like the schools having gardens to teach the
Yes,
kids. It's one thing, they keep them busy, but also, I keep reading about the terrible food that kids are served. I remember we had pizza burgers and pizza and spaghetti and meatball. Like, I just feel like there are so many better options if they're growing food. I mean, and there's the appreciation and understanding, and those kids are going to grow up and be like, I can totally do this. Even if it's just herbs or tomatoes or whatever. I keep seeing on a homesteading Facebook page that you can build this, like, I don't know, like 2 by 2 block of boards, and plant potatoes in there and get like 100 pounds of potatoes in like a
that's
4 foot tall block. I'm like, who can't do that?
I love, and I love that you said too, incorporating it like even into like children's gardens, because I know a few schools that I worked at in the past, they were right there like at those beginning stages of doing that. But how cool would it be if kids, first of all, having that connection to know where their food comes from, and then equally important to say, you know what, guys, how about we have some agency over the menu? So we're going to have pizza. Great. The garden this month, we have plenty of tomatoes. We've got plenty of spinach. How about we go ahead and harvest it and take it to the kitchen so that that pizza
Yes.
that's actually created that we're having is even yummier than it has ever been because it came straight from the garden. And as they're learning about beekeeping and pollination and those things, but to see that connection, the reason that bees are not to be feared but to be respected because of the job that they do, growing the amount of pollinating the amount of food that they do for us in this country. I mean, it's just amazing. And kids are so connected to that when they can actually see visually, nope, this area over here is for compost, this is over here, this is for bees, this is pollination happening, we've got this over here, and we get to enjoy the results of this because when we harvest it, right, we take it into the kitchen, we know exactly where it comes from. I just think it would be
Absolutely.
so incredibly meaningful for them.
It would be so beneficial for everyone. I mean, I think,
Yes.
it would be, I have this vision. I don't have children, but like if you were to drive by a school or visit a school or something, and at recess you see the kids, crowding around the garden and like checking it
Yes,
out and maybe picking some stuff or watering, weeding. Oh my goodness. Like
that's
it's
right.
something to keep them busy, calming. Oh my goodness.
That's
Garden
right.
therapy, you
It's
know?
so true. You're so right. And it's just, and also I think about the amount of time that they would get outdoors, just be able to, that connection to nature. Oh, just so important. You're so
Yeah.
right.
Wow, you're so right. I think that I'm glad that we're on the same page with that. I
Mhm.
think, I keep hearing about food shortages, and I know like I've said it before, but I've read that I think it's like 90% of the food that we eat in the state of Maine, it comes from outside of the state. Even though we have all this space and we have all these farms, like we are sending that out. So
Yeah.
like if the kids were, just had that appreciation and had that involvement and were growing some food and feeling that ownership and appreciation and eating healthy, like, oh man, it just seems like such a natural thing and
Exactly.
such a simple thing to do. I mean, I talked to this guy a few weeks ago who was working, he was teaching physics, but he built a raised garden bed at the school with his kids, and then they planted a garden. And
Awesome.
some of the kids were like, this is stupid. And then by the time everything started to grow, they're like, oh, hey, look at that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
Yeah. Anyway, I think that schools have some learning to do. I don't know. I feel like
you're right. You're so
it's
right.
it's
Yeah, we
not
could
it's
all
not a
benefit.
very big thing, but it would make such a big difference.
That's right. We can all benefit from that. You're so right.
Dang. But so I want to hear about this podcast that you had. You said for a couple of years.
Yeah, so I actually am a health coach, home cook, and then, of course, small space gardener. And I started a health coaching podcast a couple years ago. So I had a podcast called the Iron Deficiency Anemia Podcast because I was, as a health coach, helping women who had iron deficiency anemia to boost their energy naturally and maintain it. So I was helping with that. And so a podcast, it was just my way of connecting, which is kind of how I ended up meeting you through the podcast collaborative. But I started there as a way to really just kind of help women with the health, nutrition, and lifestyle part. Because for 33 years, I had struggled with iron deficiency anemia. And so it was my way of saying, how could I help other women? Um, but I knew at the end of the day that that was part of what I wanted to do. And I always knew on a larger scale that I wanted to get back to focusing solely on small space gardening. Prior to health coaching, I actually ran a challenge called the Small Space Garden Made Easy Challenge. And we had about 1,000 people register from
A
around the country.
thousand people.
1,000 people register, and they were, you know what it does, Amy? It brings me back to, there's something so primal and so connected. People with, and these are all small spaces. These are people in apartment buildings, people with some light, no light, barely any light. And they just all came together to do one thing, to try to grow what they could in the space that they had. And I love that the smaller the space, the better. It was just so cool to watch people say, wait a minute, I want to do this and I want to grow that and I want to grow this. And so it was all about growing your faves. It was about growing your favorites. It wasn't about, it was 3 days, and it wasn't 3 days with me saying, okay, we're going to grow thyme, oregano, and basil. I said, tell me what you love. I said, here are the steps. Go ahead and grab your packets. And on day one, we're going to start growing together. And so we all shared our containers on day one. So it was a pot and a container, like herb party. It was incredible. And it was winter. So again, we know that sometimes, sadness, depression, gray skies, all those things. And so it was also
Perfect
just a cool
timing.
way, yeah, to say, wait a minute, we can still feel like there's some life happening at this time of the year. So it was so much fun.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
Connection in the middle of winter is so important. That's awesome. Good for you. I can't, 1,000 people. How did you do that?
Oh, Facebook ads. Facebook ads. Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
But
right.
it was
You're super smart.
but it
Um,
was so much fun
that's
to really
awesome.
watch the results, to see people share their goodness, to show what they were growing, and to show the different stages. Whether it was just, I dropped the seed in there, here's the soil, I'm hoping for something in the next 30 days, versus people who had, had some that were a little bit further along, but it was so much fun to watch.
Mm. Yeah, I when I was planting my seeds on Saturday, I was looking at the packets, and I think it was the cilantro that said 10 days to germination. So I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna see in 10 days whether that worked or not.
Yeah.
And then the oregano and basil, they said like 50 days. So obviously that's not germination, that's gonna be to fruition. But so I guess it'll be 10-ish days when I
Yeah, yeah.
when
But
I
I
start
love
to
to
see
see like
something.
what magic is happening, right? You kind of just go over, and then when you see that first little green leaf kind of, peek its head out, and you're like, oh,
It's working!
I love it. Oh God.
Oh, yes, for sure. I've
So Amy,
totally
I
like,
know this is your podcast, but I've got to ask you, are you a
okay.
gloves or no gloves person when you're in the
Oh,
soil?
no gloves. No
Yes,
gloves. Unless
no
I'm,
gloves.
what is it that I do wear gloves when I'm doing, oh, weeding. A lot of
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
weeding, but like we have some thistle that the birds drop in our garden, and so I
Uh,
get thistle and I have to,
let's protect your hands.
oh my
Yes, yes.
gosh. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but generally no gloves. I'm a volunteer gardener at a local farm also, just for a couple hours on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Um, and we bring gloves in the spring. We bring them year
Right.
round. I have them in the car in case we're doing something on a muddy day, but I generally don't wear gloves unless it's cold.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, me too. And I actually don't get manicures for that reason, because I love to have my hands just like in the soil. So yeah,
Right? You have the little black outline of your fingernails from the
that's
dirt.
right.
Yeah,
How did you know?
I have it too.
That's right. Oh,
Oh my goodness. So this is so fun. I just love talking to people that plant stuff, and I love that you are so passionate about it. It's just so fun. So what is when I say the word sustainability, Asia, what does that mean to you?
it's interesting when I thought about that question and I knew you were going to ask it. I said to myself, God, I see it in two ways, Amy. And the first way, when I think about sustainability and I think about us as human beings and just being good humans, I think about nourishment. And so I always think about to nourish. And that means like just nourishing ourselves, feeding ourselves goodness, things that we grow with our own hands, and then we're sustaining our bodies in that way. But secondly, when I think back to living on that land out in Roanoke, Virginia, in the Troutville area, I thought about just being a good steward of the space that I had. And when I thought about that, it doesn't matter whether we have an acre of land or we have just a couple of containers. I think about being a good steward, just taking great care of what we're responsible for. So if we're entrusted with, 3 containers, we take great care of those. If we're entrusted with 3 acres, we take great care of that. But I just think about it's really being um, just really responsible for what you have in your care. And I think when I think about gardening, and I'm going to say, because we're just talking about food, but herb gardening, veggie gardening, I just think about the sense of humility that I feel when something comes up. And I know that I'm not solely responsible for the creation of it. I was just here doing my part as a caretaker, but I know that nature has its play, and between sun and water. And then my job is to make sure that I put it in the best place possible to allow things to happen. But I think, like, when I think sustainability, I just feel deeply, deeply honored to be a part of that process, to just be a little part of that process. So I think about food for ourselves, nourishing ourselves, but then also being just responsible and good stewards of what we have in our care.
You are so amazing.
Oh no,
I
but
just love that. It's
I
so
just,
true. I mean, we're
yeah,
part of the process, but without our part of the process, it's not going to, it's not going to happen. Um, but I just love the way that you said that. And I feel very similarly. Like I always think of, leaving things better than the way you found it. So like adding
yes,
to and just making things and I had this conversation with somebody a week or so ago, and he was like, why do you feel so strongly about sustainability? And I might have said this on the podcast last week, but like I grew up in the 80s where there was excess, like everything, you're not thinking
yes,
about anyone or anything. You're just like listening to music and watching movies and, loud engines and hairspray and all the makeup and all the
that's
chemicals
right.
and convenience foods. And we just were like, we did so much damage and we didn't care at that point. And so now I feel sort of responsible for that. Like I need to try to amend that.
Right.
And of
Yeah.
course it's too big for just me, but I feel like a lot of people probably feel that way. I mean, not like we killed the world and now we need to fix it, but like it's a big it's a big ask. And if we're all doing something,
That's it.
then we're going to make a difference.
That's
Even
it.
if it's not a big difference, we're making a difference, and we can all do a part. So,
You're so right. And that's it. Everyone does something, and
yeah,
that's how it all gets done,
yeah,
And so, yeah, no, but I'm right there with you. And it's so true. It's so true. And it doesn't need to be some big, huge action. It's just simply like taking care of the patch you have right in front of you. I mean, it, I don't want to say it's so simple, but in some ways it is simple. Some ways it
it
is.
seems simple, like it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it all adds up.
It is. That's it. It all adds up. I love that.
It just, you take care of your little area and do your thing, and it will make a difference. Whether, you might not see it today, but if you think
That's
about
right.
all the all the plants that you grew, all the vegetables that you ate, that you grew, as opposed to spending money at the store and supporting the big business and stuff like that, like just how much better that produce is that you ate. And
Right.
you just planted some seeds. When you think about it that way, like I just planted some seeds, but then you think about your place, even though it's not the whole process, that the outcome is just, it really is like a miracle.
It's amazing. And when you get more than you need, then the human connection comes into play, because then we start thinking about, ooh, who could use what I have? What neighbor can I drop this off at? And I'll never forget when we were living in Virginia, and I had a neighbor who would always drop off tomatoes. I mean, they came in like gangbusters. And I loved it. She was so flustered. She came over. She says, we cannot eat all these tomatoes. I have got to share with you. I said, see, that in itself, sustainability. It's kind of like, you get this ripple effect of amazing things happen, because when it grows, it grows.
Right.
So yeah, it's just amazing.
Right. And for me, so my other, I mean, sustainability means so much to me, but one of the, so I have less waste, like producing less waste and making less waste in general. But then my other is community. Like very selfishly, I'm building this community that I'm going to help out and will help me, like whether it's physical or just, um, just support, but
That's
more like
awesome.
moral support. But like I'm building this community. I have a post-it note right behind my laptop on the wall that says community sufficiency. Like
Oh, I
I just
love it.
it's not just one person. We need to take care of each other and take care of our community. And
That's right.
if we have a community and somebody is hungry or someone is malnourished or someone is sad or something, like that's part of our job as well, to take care of
That's
each other.
right.
So that's that is me. But so
Beautifully
anyway,
said.
you have, I just wanted to let people know about your upcoming workshop, which is the same one that I just did, but you have it
Yeah.
coming again next month. Do you have a date for that?
I do. It's actually Saturday, March 18th. So it'll be from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time. And yes, so it's another invite to the kitchen herb garden workshop. And
Yeah.
so yeah, the website is just kitchenherbworkshop.com. And I would love, Amy, if you share just a couple of minutes, like if there's anything in there that you felt like was really beneficial, because again, it's so much more powerful coming from someone who's been, through it for that hour. But, in our short 60 minutes together, if there's anything you feel like would be like super important for people to know.
Hmm. I just love the way that you shared it, really. I mean, I am
Thank you.
so impressed by you, and I love that I've been to many talks and people are talking about planting big gardens and stuff, and I'm so impressed that you're like steadfast in your container gardening, and that you get so excited. Like, it's impossible to not feel that energy from you. And
That's so awesome.
I was telling you, I usually plant too early, and so I like to hold off. And I was so excited. I was so excited. The last thing that I said, I'm like, I'm going to go plant right now. And then
And
I
I
sent
was
you
like,
pictures that afternoon.
woo,
You
yeah.
you did that to me, and I'm so
Oh,
grateful, because I'm excited for herbs to grow in my house with my
yeah.
lemons.
Oh, those
um,
lemons sound, oh man, that sounds so delicious though. Oh
I
man.
just planted seeds for most of them. I just was so
Oh,
I got the bug. I had a little lemon tree and it makes some lemons. I'm like, but if I have lots of lemon trees, I'm gonna get lots of lemons.
that's it. That's it. Oh God, I absolutely love that. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the whole container thing. I just think in this world right now, we have far more people who are living in smaller spaces than are living in larger spaces. And there's a couple of challenges with that, right? So people who live, I mean, I think about my great grandparents, they were all on farms. And so, the most of their food, came from the soil. And then they would barter with other neighbors for the
Right.
things that they wanted. But today, most of us are getting our foods from the supermarket. Most of us are, because if we're living in big cities or we're living in high rises, and I'm originally from New York City, I haven't lived there in like almost 30 years. But when I think about living in a big city, you're so not connected to your food source. So you've got to get it somewhere. But almost everyone I talk to has a little small balcony. No matter where they live, they have a little small balcony, and most of them have a windowsill. So when we start to think about, okay, let's look at those small spaces, like nothing gives me more joy than to help people kind of look throughout their homes and say, let's see what you do have. We're not going to focus on, Betsy down the road who's got 4 acres, and then you're thinking you can't grow
Right.
anything because you don't have 4 acres. I said, let's look at what you do have. And they go, wait a minute, I can put something here. I'm like, yeah, windowsills are mighty. A small and mighty windowsill. It's
Yep.
amazing what can happen in that small space. And then you get the bug, right? Because then you start growing one thing and then you go, oh, and then you become like, instead of, for me, the crazy cat lady, the crazy seed packet lady. And then you start just going to garden centers and you grab more seed packets than you have room to grow. But it's just such a delight to see what's possible. And that's what I really want to do, is show people in small spaces, in apartments, in townhomes, with small decks, patios, porches, what's possible.
That's so awesome. That's so awesome. And so Saturday, March 18th at 1 p.m. Eastern. This is
Yeah,
on
join.
Zoom. It's on
Fun.
Zoom, you guys, so easy to join, and
Yeah.
you can catch some of this energy from Miss Asia. and she's going to want you to plant your own. You can bring your pot to the workshop and your
That's
soil
right.
and your seeds and put them in right there. She's going to give you a few seconds to do it, or you can just watch her and then plant it afterward, like
That's
me,
it. That's it.
because I
Yeah,
was
step by
not
step.
prepared.
And
But
I'm so glad you said that too, because also for people who can't join live, you also have a replay. So if you feel like, oh, either I want to watch live and just watch and then plant later, like you did, which was awesome, or if you decide, oh, I can't make it live, but I still want to do it and I want to take that replay and then I still want to go ahead and stop it and pause it and go step by step. But
yeah,
thank you so much for entrusting me for that hour to help you get yours started.
I wouldn't have missed it. Oh my gosh. So hook up with Asia. She's also, I'm going to ask, where can people find you? I know you gave the website for the
Yes,
workshop, but you're also
right.
on Facebook
On
and
Instagram.
Instagram.
On Instagram, and my handle is at @𝗚𝗏𝗏clark.com. No, .com. At @𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏. I'm so used to my website,
Okay.
but at @𝗚𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏. Yep.
And so that's ASHARIF, like Frank Clark. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no hyphen like in your actual name.
No hyphen. Yep.
Okay.
No hyphen in Instagram. And you'll find me there. Yep.
Okay. So, and then I think you can find the website too through your bio. Is that
It
right?
is. It's right
Okay.
there. Yep. You'll see that Kitchener workshop right at the top as well. And then also too, if you have a question or you're wondering if this is for me, just feel free to just DM me, send me a message. Happy to just kind of go back and forth and answer a couple questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
For sure. Follow Asia on Instagram because she's always posting green pictures and they are so beautiful and cheery in the middle of winter.
Oh, thank you.
So, Asia, thank you so much. I love talking with you.
Oh, thank
Just
you.
I feel so much energy coming from you, and you you just make me want to go do everything all over again.
I
You
love
make me
it.
excited for growing season.
And as you do me, Amy, oh, this is so awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, I'm just gonna